The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. At first, the radio astronomers at the Global Space Center thought it was just another burst of cosmic noise. But as the signal repeated itself with perfect precision every 10 minutes, they knew this was different. This was what humanity had been waiting for, hoping for, and secretly dreading for centuries. Admiral James Reed stood at the window of his office in the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The coffee in his hand had gone cold hours ago, forgotten in the chaos of the last 12 hours. The message they had received was short, clear, and terrifying in its simplicity. Submit or be classified as a hostile species. The aliens didn't even bother to introduce themselves properly. Their arrogance was clear in every word of their transmission. They called themselves the Collective, a confederation of species that had apparently been watching Earth for some time. Their message included technical specifications that made Earth's most advanced technology look like children's toys. "Sir," his aide knocked and entered the office. "The President is ready for the emergency meeting." Reed nodded, straightening his uniform. In the 30 years he'd served in the military, he'd never imagined he'd be humanity's first line of defense against an alien threat. The meeting room was packed with the most powerful people on Earth. Military commanders, political leaders, and scientific experts all gathered around a massive table, their faces illuminated by the holographic display of the alien message floating above them. The President looked older than she had just yesterday, the weight of this moment visible in the new lines on her face. "What do we know about their capabilities?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pressure. Dr. Wright, the head of Earth's scientific coalition, stood up. Her hands trembled slightly as she manipulated the hologram. "Their ship is currently positioned just beyond Jupiter's orbit. The energy readings we're getting—" She paused, swallowing hard. "They're beyond anything we've ever seen. Their vessel appears to be roughly the size of Manhattan." The room fell silent. Reed studied the readings, his military mind already calculating odds and possibilities. Their technology might be superior, but humanity had something these aliens seemed to lack: the experience of being the underdog. "They're giving us 48 hours to respond," Reed said, breaking the silence. "But here's what they don't know. We've been preparing for this possibility for decades. Project Phoenix isn't just a theory anymore." The President's eyes widened. Project Phoenix was the military's best-kept secret, a defensive system that combined conventional weapons with experimental technology reversed engineered from a crashed alien probe found in the Arctic 10 years ago. They had kept it hidden, knowing that someday humanity might need an ace up its sleeve. "The Collective's message shows they think we're primitive," Reed continued. "Their scans probably show our official military capabilities, our public face. But they don't know about Phoenix, about the underground bases, about the quantum communications network we've been building in secret. And what if it's not enough?" someone asked from the back of the room. Reed smiled grimly. "Then we do what humans have always done. We adapt. We survive. We fight back. These aliens think they're dealing with a primitive species that will either submit or be easily conquered. They're about to learn that humanity doesn't fit into their neat categories." The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. While the official channels prepared a diplomatic response, the world's military forces quietly moved into position. Underground bunkers were activated, secret weapons were brought online, and emergency protocols were initiated across the globe. As Reed watched the preparations from his command center, he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity had spent its history fighting itself, but now, faced with an external threat, old enemies were setting aside their differences. Former adversaries were sharing military resources, scientists from rival nations were collaborating, and the entire human race was uniting in a way that had never seemed possible before. The aliens had made a crucial mistake. They had judged humanity by its visible technology, by its apparent divisions, by its seeming primitiveness. They hadn't bothered to study human history. to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons or its technology, but in its stubborn refusal to submit, its ability to unite against overwhelming odds, and its remarkable capacity to turn disadvantages into advantages. As the deadline for their response approached, Reed looked at the message from the collective one more time. Their arrogance would be their downfall. Because if there was one thing humanity had learned through countless wars and struggles, it was this: never underestimate a species that had survived its own worst impulses and emerged stronger. The neutral meeting station hung in space like a giant silver coin catching the light of distant stars. Ambassador Robert Stone watched it grow larger through the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle, his expression neutral despite the tension knotting his stomach. Behind him sat Admiral Reed and 2 armed guards, all of them wearing their best uniforms for this first face-to-face meeting with the collective. "Remember," Reed said quietly, "no matter what they show us in there, don't let them see fear." Stone nodded. He had spent the last week memorizing Earth's carefully crafted response. It wasn't the submission the collective expected, but neither was it an outright refusal. It was something far more dangerous, a warning wrapped in a history lesson. The docking procedure was smooth, almost disappointingly normal. Stone had expected something more alien, but airlocks, it seemed, were universal. The station's interior was bathed in pale blue light that made everything look slightly unreal. The air smelled like ozone and something sweet he couldn't identify. High Commander Vale of the collective waited for them in the meeting chamber, along with representatives from 3 other alien species. Vale stood nearly 8 feet tall, with silvery skin that seemed to ripple like water. The other aliens were equally impressive. One seemed to be made entirely of crystalline structures. Another had multiple arms and eyes, and the third looked almost human except for its pure white eyes. "Welcome, primitives," Vale said through a translator device. "We trust you have come to accept your place in the natural order." Stone smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Actually, High Commander, we've come to share a story with you, a history lesson, if you will." The aliens exchanged looks that even across species barriers clearly showed amusement. Vale gestured magnanimously. "Proceed with your story." Stone activated the holographic projector he had brought. Images began to fill the room. Cave paintings, ancient battles, great monuments, modern cities. Humanity, he began, has spent its entire existence being underestimated. By nature, by rivals, by ourselves. The images shifted to show various moments in human history. People surviving in extreme environments, rebuilding after disasters, overcoming seemingly impossible odds. We survived an ice age with nothing but stone tools and determination. We crossed oceans in wooden boats using just the stars to guide us. We've survived plagues, wars, natural disasters. Vale's amusement began to fade as Stone continued. The images now showed humanity's scientific achievements, their space exploration, their rapid technological advancement. In just 1 century, we went from our first powered flight to landing on our moon. In another, we colonized Mars and mined the asteroid belt. We split the atom, decoded our own genome, and learned to harness fusion power. Impressive for primitives, Vale interrupted, but nothing compared to collective achievements. Stone's smile grew sharper. "That's not the point of our story, High Commander. The point is this. Every time someone or something has tried to destroy us, subjugate us, or dismiss us, they failed. Because humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our stubborn refusal to accept defeat." A hologram now showed Earth's military forces, but not in the way the collective expected. Instead of grand parades and powerful weapons, it showed guerrilla warfare, resistance movements, innovative solutions to overwhelming odds. We don't just fight with weapons, we fight with cunning. We adapt. We improvise. We overcome. "Is this a threat?" Vale asked, their silvery skin rippling with what might have been anger. "No, High Commander. This is a warning, one that history has taught us many times. The most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the biggest weapons. It's the one who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Stone let the hologram fade and stepped closer to Vale. You've given us one standard galactic month to submit. We'll use that time to consider your offer. But remember this. Every species that has ever underestimated humanity has regretted it. We hope the collective is wise enough to learn from their mistakes rather than repeat them. The meeting ended shortly after, with Vale dismissing them with obvious disdain. But as Stone and Reed walked back to their shuttle, they noticed the other alien representatives whispering among themselves. Seeds of doubt had been planted. "Think they got the message?" Reed asked quietly. Stone watched the stars through the viewport as their shuttle pulled away from the station. They heard it. Whether they understand it, well, that's their choice. But we've done what humans do best. We've warned them fairly, shown them exactly who we are, and given them the chance to make the right decision. And if they make the wrong one, then we'll do what humans do second best, Stone said grimly. We'll show them exactly why they should have listened. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Dr. Emily Wright held up a small piece of alien technology. The device, no bigger than a coin, had been salvaged from the crashed probe found in the Arctic. Under normal light, it looked almost ordinary, but when activated, it bent space in ways that defied Earth's physics. "We've done it," she announced to the team gathered around her workstation. "We've finally figured out how their shield technology works." She placed the device into a testing chamber and pressed a button. A shimmer of energy rippled through the air, forming a barrier that their strongest weapons couldn't penetrate. The team broke into applause, but Emily wasn't celebrating yet. They had only 3 weeks left before the collective's deadline, and understanding the technology was just the first step. Now they had to find a way to mass-produce it using Earth's materials and technology. Meanwhile, in a different part of the same facility, General Mark Torres watched a computer simulation of Earth's defense plans. The screen showed red dots representing collective ships and blue dots representing Earth's forces. Traditional military doctrine said their forces should be concentrated, defending key positions. Torres had thrown that doctrine out the window. "Show me simulation Delta 7, he ordered. The screen changed, showing Earth's forces scattered in seemingly random patterns. To an advanced alien eye, it would look like chaos, like humans panicking and losing organization. But there was a method to this madness. They'll expect us to fight like a modern military," Torres explained to his officers. "Instead, we'll fight like our ancestors, like the guerrilla fighters who brought empires to their knees, like the resistance movements that survived against all odds. We'll make them chase shadows while we strike from unexpected angles." Above ground, the world continued its normal routines. News channels debated the alien situation, but few knew about the real preparations happening in secret facilities around the globe. Underground bunkers were being stocked, weapons were being modified with reversed-engineered alien tech, and soldiers were training for scenarios that would have seemed like science fiction just months ago. In orbit, construction crews disguised as routine satellite maintenance teams were installing hidden weapons platforms. The collective scans would see them as ordinary communication satellites, but each one carried experimental weapons designed by Dr. Wright's team. Admiral Reed coordinated it all from a mobile command center, never staying in one place for too long. He knew the collective was watching, but humanity had gotten good at hiding things over the centuries. Every visible military movement was a distraction, while the real preparations happened in the shadows. "How's Project Phoenix coming along?" Reed asked during a secure video call with Dr. Wright. "Better than expected," she replied, dark circles under her eyes betraying her lack of sleep. "We've managed to adapt their shield technology to work with our existing power systems. It won't be as strong as theirs, but it doesn't need to be. We just need it to hold long enough to surprise them." The best minds on Earth were working around the clock, fueled by coffee and determination. Scientists who had once competed for grants now shared discoveries freely. Engineers from rival companies worked side by side. The approaching threat had done what nothing else could. It had united humanity in purpose, if not in governance. In private moments, Reed wondered if the collective realized what they had done. By threatening Earth, they had given humanity something it had always needed but rarely had: a common enemy. Every war, every struggle, every near-extinction event in human history had taught them lessons they were now putting to use. "Have you seen the latest intel?" Torres asked during their daily briefing. "The collective still thinks we're scrambling to organize a proper defense. Their scans show exactly what we want them to see." Reed nodded, looking at the reports. The collective's arrogance was their weakness. They saw Earth's apparent disarray and interpreted it as primitives struggling to cope. They didn't understand that humans had turned improvisation into an art form, that chaos could be a strategy rather than a weakness. As the deadline drew closer, humanity's true preparations remained hidden beneath a carefully crafted surface of diplomatic delays and visible military posturing. The collective would be expecting shields, weapons, and organized resistance. What they wouldn't expect was the web of unconventional tactics and innovative solutions that humans had spent their entire history perfecting. In her lab, Dr. Wright put the finishing touches on another piece of hybrid technology. "Let them think we're primitive," she muttered to herself. "Let them think we're just copying their tech. They'll learn soon enough that humanity's greatest weapon isn't the technology we borrow. It's what we do with it." The collective's attack began exactly as Admiral Reed had predicted, with overwhelming force and absolute confidence. Their massive ships appeared in perfect formation above Earth's major cities, their hulls gleaming in the morning sun. They didn't bother with stealth or surprise. Why should they? Their scans showed Earth's defenses were primitive, scattered, and wholly inadequate. In his underground command center, Reed watched the alien ships fill the sky. His hands were steady as he picked up his coffee cup, a habit from countless military operations. "Are they broadcasting yet?" he asked. Right on cue, the collective's message began playing on every frequency. "Your time for submission has expired. Prepare for immediate pacification." Reed took a sip of his coffee and smiled. "Send the signal." Around the world, disguised satellites suddenly came to life. The collective's sensors registered a surge of energy, but their computers dismissed it as random atmospheric interference. That was their first mistake. Dr. Wright stood in her lab, watching the energy readings spike on her monitors. The hybrid shields they had developed using reverse-engineered alien tech were powering up exactly as planned. But unlike the collective's obvious energy barriers, these shields were practically invisible, bending light and energy in ways that alien sensors weren't programmed to detect. The collective launched their first wave of attacks. Energy weapons designed to disable Earth's power grids and communication systems. Their beams struck the hidden shield layer, and something unprecedented happened. Instead of being stopped or absorbed, the energy was redirected through patterns Dr. Wright's team had spent weeks perfecting. "First phase successful," she reported, her voice tense with excitement. "The shields are converting their energy weapons into usable power, just like we hoped." Above New York, a collective battleship commander watched in confusion as their initial strike seemed to simply disappear. Before they could adjust their weapons, the energy reappeared, transformed and redirected back at them in a way their own shields weren't configured to stop. The massive ship shuddered as its shield generators overloaded. Similar scenes played out across the globe as humanity's invisible defense network turned the collective's own power against them. Within minutes, a third of their fleet had lost shield capability. "Launch counter-offensive," Reed ordered. Pattern Delta 7. From hidden bunkers, abandoned mines, and underwater bases, Earth's forces emerged. But instead of the predictable military response the collective expected, they faced something their battle computers couldn't process. Humans had combined their primitive nuclear weapons with phase shift technology salvaged from the alien probe. The modified warheads didn't travel in straight lines. They phased in and out of normal space, following paths that looked random but were precisely calculated to bypass the collective's remaining shields. Their computers, programmed for logical, predictable warfare, couldn't track weapons that deliberately moved in inefficient patterns. In orbit, a collective captain watched in horror as 3 of his support ships vanished in flashes of light. "Impossible," he muttered in his native tongue. "Their weapons are too primitive to." His words were cut off as his own ship's warning systems screamed. The humans had adapted quickly, learning from each successful hit to make their next attacks even more unpredictable. General Torres coordinated the ground response, using tactics that would have looked like madness to traditional military strategists. Earth's forces didn't concentrate their fire on the largest ships or obvious weak points. Instead, they struck at seemingly random targets, creating patterns of chaos that were actually carefully designed to overload the aliens' tactical computers. "They're retreating," someone shouted in the command center. On the main screen, the massive collective ships were pulling back, their perfect formation shattered. More than a third of their fleet had been destroyed or disabled in less than an hour of combat. But Reed wasn't celebrating yet. This was just their first wave, he reminded his staff. "They'll be back, and next time they won't underestimate us." Dr. Wright's voice came over the comm system. "The good news is that we've collected enough data from this battle to improve our shields. The bad news is that they'll adapt too." This was just the opening move. Reed nodded, already planning the next phase. The collective had just learned a costly lesson about humanity's capacity for innovation. But more importantly, they had revealed something crucial. Their rigid, predictable tactics could be turned against them. "Send word to all commands," Reed ordered. "Begin Phase 2 preparations. The real war is about to begin." Commander Lisa Foster crouched in the ruins of what had once been downtown London, her small team hidden beneath portable cloaking devices reverse-engineered from collective technology. Above them, an alien patrol ship hummed quietly, its sensors sweeping the area in predictable patterns. The aliens never learned. They always stuck to their protocols, even when those protocols failed them. "Team 2 in position," whispered a voice in her earpiece. "Team 3 reports all clear." Lisa checked her wrist display, watching the tiny dots that represented her forces. The collective thought they had superior numbers, superior weapons, and superior tactics. They were about to learn another lesson about human ingenuity. "Execute Operation Ghost," she ordered quietly. Across the ruined city, small teams of human fighters activated devices that Dr. Wright's team had created. Each device mimicked the energy signature of a major human military force. Within seconds, the collective's sensors detected what appeared to be a full army division emerging from hidden bunkers. The patrol ship responded exactly as their military doctrine demanded. It called for reinforcements and moved to engage the perceived threat. As dozens of collective ships converged on the false signals, Lisa's team struck from multiple directions using modified weapons that phased through the aliens' standard shields. "Remember," she told her troops, "don't fall into patterns. Keep them guessing." The human strike teams moved like ghosts through the ruins, never attacking the same way twice, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. The collective's advanced AI systems struggled to predict movements that deliberately defied logical patterns. Meanwhile, in a secure facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, a team of human hackers led by Dr. Wright had made their own breakthrough. The collective's network wasn't just a communication system. It was the foundation of their entire military strategy, coordinating their forces with algorithmic precision. "Their network security is based on processing power," Dr. Wright explained to Admiral Reed over a secure channel. "They assume no lesser species could have the computational ability to break their encryption. But we're not trying to break it. We're teaching their own systems to distrust each other." The hackers had spent weeks inserting small errors into the collective's data streams. Not enough to be detected, but enough to create doubt. Ships began receiving conflicting orders. Sensor readings became unreliable. The perfect coordination that made the collective so formidable began to break down. In orbit, a collective command ship received urgent reports from Earth. Their forces were engaging human armies that appeared and disappeared like smoke, every time they committed forces to attack a major human military gathering. They found only empty buildings and false energy signatures. Meanwhile, their real forces were being picked apart by small, highly mobile teams that struck without warning and vanished before they could respond. "Impossible," the ship's commander muttered, watching another patrol fall into a human trap. "They're primitives. Their tactics make no sense." But that was exactly the point. Humans had learned through centuries of warfare that sometimes the best strategy was to abandon strategy altogether, to be so unpredictable that no amount of advanced planning could counter you. Lisa's teams continued their hit-and-run attacks, each strike carefully planned to seem random. The collective's forces were designed to fight proper battles, to engage with enemies that followed the rules of warfare. They weren't prepared for an enemy that turned city ruins into labyrinths, that used their own technology against them in ways its creators never imagined. In his command center, Admiral Reed watched the reports flow in. The collective was losing ships and troops not to superior firepower, but to confusion and chaos. Their perfectly ordered military machine was being taken apart by humans who refused to fight the way they were supposed to. Update from Dr. Wright. His aide reported, "The network disruption is spreading faster than expected. Their ships are starting to question orders from high command." Reed nodded. This was the human factor that the collective had never considered. Humans didn't just fight with weapons and tactics. They fought with creativity, with desperation, with a willingness to try the impossible just to see if it might work. The collective had expected Earth to either submit or fight a conventional war. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that turned their own strengths into weaknesses, that fought like 1,000 different armies instead of one, that seemed to defy the very laws of warfare they had perfected over centuries. As Lisa's team prepared for another strike, she smiled grimly. Let the aliens call humans primitive. In the end, it wasn't the most advanced species that survived. It was the most adaptable. High Commander Vale stood before the Collective Council, trying to explain how a primitive species had managed to destroy nearly half their invasion fleet. The crystalline beings that made up most of the council shifted uneasily, their surfaces reflecting the dim light of the chamber. The humans, Vale admitted, are not fighting according to any known military doctrine. Our losses are mounting, and our tactical computers cannot predict their next moves. In the back of the chamber, representatives from younger collective species whispered among themselves. The humans' resistance had sparked something dangerous. Doubt. If a primitive species could fight the collective to a standstill, what did that say about the collective's superiority? Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador Stone prepared for another diplomatic broadcast. The humans had discovered that not all collective species supported the war. Some had joined the collective through similar ultimatums, forced to submit or be destroyed. These species watched Earth's resistance with growing interest. Send the message on all frequencies, Stone ordered. Make sure every collective ship and colony receives it. The broadcast began, showing not Earth's military might, but its unity. Humans of every nation working together, sharing resources, protecting each other. Former enemies fighting side by side against the common threat. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for independence, for the right to choose their own path. Dr. Wright's team had ensured the broadcast couldn't be blocked. It slipped through the gaps they'd created in the collective's network, spreading like a virus through their communication systems. Some collective ships tried to shut it out, but their crews had already seen enough to plant seeds of doubt. In orbit, a collective battle group prepared to attack a suspected human stronghold. But when the order came to fire on civilian shelters, 3 ships suddenly broke formation. Their commanders, from species that had once been primitives themselves, refused to follow orders they now saw as wrong. Admiral Reed watched from his command center as the collective's unity began to crack. "They're starting to break," he told his staff. "Their younger species are questioning orders. Some of their ships are refusing to fire on civilian targets. The collective had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed that all species would think and act like them, that military superiority meant absolute control. They hadn't counted on humans sharing their technology and tactics with other resistance movements within the collective itself. Commander Lisa Foster's guerrilla teams had proved that a smaller force could fight effectively against superior numbers. Now, resistance cells were forming on other collective worlds, using human tactics to fight for their own freedom. The rigid order of the collective was being challenged from within and without. "Send word to our allies in the collective," Reed ordered. "The time to act is now." Across the galaxy, ships from younger collective species began to rebel. They used human-inspired tactics, striking carefully chosen targets and vanishing before the collective could respond. The perfect hierarchy that had maintained control for so long was unraveling. In her lab, Dr. Wright monitored the chaos spreading through the collective's network. The small errors and doubts they had planted had grown into a full-scale rebellion. Ships couldn't trust their orders. Command centers received conflicting information. The mighty collective war machine was paralyzed by uncertainty. The council chamber erupted into arguments. Some members demanded even harsher measures against Earth, while others called for an immediate end to the war. The oldest species insisted on maintaining control, but their authority was no longer absolute. "The humans must be destroyed," Vale insisted. "If we show weakness now, everything we've built will collapse." "Perhaps," said a crystalline council member, "it should collapse. Perhaps we were wrong about what makes a species advanced." Stone's broadcast continued to play throughout the collective's territory. It showed humans helping injured alien crews, sharing medical technology, offering alliance instead of demanding submission. It was a different kind of strength than the collective understood, the strength to offer peace from a position of power. Reed received reports from across the galaxy. The collective's invasion fleet was in disarray, torn between following orders and following conscience. Their perfect formation had broken down into chaos as more ships either withdrew from battle or turned against their former masters. "They're reaching their breaking point," Reed told his staff. "But remember, a wounded enemy is often most dangerous. Stay alert. The war isn't over yet." The collective's mighty empire, built on fear and force, was discovering that true strength came in many forms. And humanity, the primitives they had tried to conquer, had shown the galaxy a different way forward. The grand meeting hall of the former collective capital world buzzed with activity. Representatives from 100 worlds gathered to sign the new Galactic Alliance Treaty. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Stone and Admiral Reed, watching as their impossible victory transformed into lasting change. The massive crystalline chamber, once a symbol of collective power, now hosted something unprecedented, a gathering of equals. Former collective species sat alongside human delegates, their differences in technology and appearance no longer marking them as superior or inferior. High Commander Vale, now stripped of most of their authority, watched from a corner as their ordered universe transformed. "How did you do it?" they finally asked Reed, their silvery skin dulled with exhaustion. "How did primitives defeat our superior technology?" Reed smiled, remembering the long months of battle. "That's the thing about being primitive," he said. "When you start with nothing, you learn to use everything. Your people forgot that progress isn't just about having the best technology. It's about how you use what you have." Across the chamber, Dr. Wright demonstrated Earth's hybrid technology to a group of alien scientists. The machines were crude by collective standards, but the innovations they represented had changed the galaxy. Humans hadn't just copied alien technology. They had reimagined it, found new uses that their creators had never considered. "The key was never the technology itself," she explained to her fascinated audience. "It was our willingness to experiment, to fail, to try things that seemed impossible. When you believe you're already perfect, you stop looking for new ways to grow." Commander Lisa Foster, now leading a joint task force of human and alien ships, shared battle tactics with former collective military leaders. They had finally understood that humanity's seeming chaos was actually a form of adaptability that their rigid systems couldn't match. "Sometimes the best strategy is to have no fixed strategy," she told them. "That's how humanity survived all these years, by being unpredictable, by refusing to follow the expected path." Stone stood at the main podium, preparing to address the gathered species. The new alliance treaty wasn't just a peace agreement. It was a complete reimagining of how different species could interact. No more demands for submission, no more judgment based on technological advancement. Instead, each species would contribute its unique strengths to the greater whole. "We stand here today, not as conquerors or conquered," Stone began, his voice carrying across the hushed chamber, "but as proof that true advancement comes in many forms. Earth didn't just survive the collective's attack. We showed the galaxy a different way forward." The treaty itself reflected this new philosophy. Younger species would receive technological assistance, but would be free to develop along their own paths. The former collective's vast knowledge would be shared, not hoarded. Military power would be balanced by diplomatic responsibility. In Earth's orbit, human ships now patrolled alongside their former enemies, their different designs a testament to the variety of approaches that could solve the same problems. The collective's perfect formations had been replaced by fluid, adaptable patterns inspired by human tactics. Dr. Wright's team had already begun working with alien scientists on new projects, combining Earth's innovative thinking with advanced alien technology. Their first joint creation was a defense system that could protect developing worlds from the kind of invasion Earth had faced. "The galaxy's changing," Reed said, watching the various species mingle freely in the chamber. "And for once, it's changing because someone stood up and said no to the old way of doing things." The former collective species were learning to think differently, to question their assumptions about progress and civilization. Some found it difficult, but others embraced the freedom to explore new ideas, to learn from those they had once dismissed as primitive. Stone finished his speech to thunderous applause from the assembled delegates. The new Galactic Alliance was more than just a replacement for the collective. It was a testament to humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, the understanding that true strength comes from diversity, adaptability, and the courage to chart your own course. As the signing ceremony began, Reed thought about the warning humanity had given the collective months ago. They had tried to warn them, "Don't underestimate us." Now that warning had become a lesson for the entire galaxy, one that would be remembered for generations to come. The age of the collective was over. The age of cooperation, of innovation, of mutual respect had begun. And it had all started because one primitive species had refused to submit, had dared to fight back, and had shown the galaxy that being different didn't mean being inferior.